What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk, the first ever episode on YouTube of Titletown Talk. It's good to see you guys. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. We are going to see how the first video episode goes. I'm going to be looking at notes here, looking at the camera here. Those of you listening, you have no idea what I just did there, but it is good to see all of you. It's been a hot minute since we've had an episode. We just got through the dead period of the year, really, not just the off season, with an explosion of news that we have got to cover. We are going to talk through the players the Packers lost, the players the Packers gained, and some potential hot stove rumors that might be going around. So, quick note before we get into the roster moves, I didn't get a chance to talk about the hiring of Cam Acord, the replacement for Rich Bisaccia at special teams coordinator. Rich Bisaccia kind of screwed the Packers. If you guys didn't hear, he resigned from the special teams coordinator position and went back to college at Clemson, which is very odd. He didn't go back to be a head coach. He went back to be a special teams coordinator, which is quite insane. So that put the Packers in a bad position. They had to essentially hire off the scrap heap. But I do think Cam Acord, however you say it, is a decent hire. He actually coordinated under Bill Belichick with the Patriots. His units have been pretty up and down. He had 1 year where they were the number one ranked special teams, and then another year where they were 32nd. So yeah, they've been a little hot and cold there. But ultimately, it doesn't really matter who the special teams coordinator is if they don't play starters on special teams, and if they don't make their kicks, and if they can't return the ball. So we have a little bit of an addition to talk about in a minute that should help special teams. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, as you guys have heard on this episode or this podcast, I don't know anything about special teams, nor do I like talking about it, nor do you guys like listening about it, or in this case, watching it. So let's talk about the contract restructures first. That allowed the Packers to make some of the moves that they did. The first thing that they did was they converted Xavier McKinney's salary into a signing bonus, which saved about $10 million, $9 million on the cap. And it essentially makes them, committed to Xavier McKinney past this season and next, which we kind of knew already. I would expect that Xavier McKinney gets a third contract and he probably finishes his career in Green Bay. I was not surprised by that. It was one of the most obvious moves on the books, but they made one that was not so obvious. They restructured Aaron Banks' contract. And there was actually some speculation, not necessarily from me, but from people who I trust and adore in the Packers sphere, that they might cut Aaron Banks. Instead, they moved money around and they basically guaranteed that he'll be here for at least next season, probably 2028 as well. So as you can see, if you're watching me on YouTube, not super happy about this one. And actually, I'm a little bit surprised by this. They had other people. They could actually have moved Micah's contract around. They could have tweaked Jordan. They could have tweaked Josh Jacobs' contract, but instead they picked Aaron Banks. We saw a hot and cold season from Banks his first year in Green Bay. Personally, I liked what I saw in the second half when he got healthier, but he's never been a great guard. And, that contract's always been pretty ugly, and it got a little bit uglier after seeing an up and down season. If he can play the way that he played the second half of the season, I do think that it could bring some value to the Packers. And honestly, in 2 years, Tyler Linderbaum just got the highest, $28 million. So ultimately, the contracts are exploding. Offensive line is getting more and more hard to find. So it might end up looking okay if we can just see that average version of Aaron Banks. Let's talk about the players the Packers lost first. And, I will say this up front. I didn't expect a lot of these guys to be back, especially at the prices that they got. So none of these I'm super upset about. We'll talk about the sort of succession plan with some of these. But the first one I want to talk about was probably the biggest surprise out of all these. They traded Rashan Gary to the Dallas Cowboys, to our good friend Jerry Jones, for a 4th-round pick. Yes, I did not stutter. 4th-round pick. I don't know if any of you guys are as plugged into Twitter this time of year as me, but I was, refreshing Twitter, and I still am, by the way, every 5 minutes of the day. When I saw that they traded Rashan Gary to the Cowboys, it initially said a round 3 pick, and I was like, huh? There's not a chance in hell they got a 3rd-round pick. Then they said a late day 3 pick. I'm like, okay, that sounds right. I'd be happy if they got a 6th or a 7th. Then they tell us that they got a 2027 4th-round pick for Rashan Gary. You guys know, they were going to cut him. In fact, if you guys didn't know, they leaked on social media that his goodbye message to the Packers fan base, which I thought was hilarious. So, again, another masterclass from Goody in essentially robbing the elderly. And Jerry Jones gave away a 4th-round pick that the Packers were going to cut. one thing that was surprising, we found this out yesterday, they actually gave him a pay cut. And the pay cut, I believe, took his contract down to like a $10 million cap hit or something low. I actually wouldn't have minded if he did this for Green Bay. Clearly, the Packers did not want him back, and they traded him to the Cowboys. So they Packers don't owe any salary to Rashan Gary. They save about $36 million over the next 2 seasons. And typically when you trade an asset like a 4th-round pick, the team that traded you away typically covers some of the salary. Now, they do owe him, or they already have some cap debt from him, dead cap, because they converted some of his salary previously to a signing bonus. But they didn't have to pay any of the money. They get all the cap savings from Rashan Gary, which is mind-blowing. So Rashan Gary is on the Cowboys. The Cowboys did not land Max Crosby. They still cloned. They did not land Trey Hendrickson. They landed Rashan Gary. So, again, just a massive miss from Jerry Jones. But thank you, Jerry, again, guys. Let's tip our caps to Jerry. We'll do a little applause. And Jerry Jones has helped the Packers out massively. Malik Willis, our old boy, our quarterback that a lot of people think is better than Jordan Love, and they're delusional, by the way. Sorry if you're listening to this podcast, you're delusional. The Miami Dolphins, a.k.a. Green Bay South, paid him $20 million a year, roughly. A lot of people thought he could get a little bit more than that. So it came in a little bit lower than that, but still good news for the Packers. We're going to talk a little bit about compensatory picks, which is essentially the NFL rewards a team that lost a big player in free agency with a draft pick. So the Packers have a lot of them because they lost a lot of guys. And essentially, if they were to make a big move in free agency, they will lose those picks. They have to decide, am I going to sign Tariq Woolen, for example, and lose a 3rd or 4th round pick? They make that decision every time they sign a free agent. If Malik Willis plays most of next season, the Packers will get a 3rd round pick. If he loses his starting job or gets hurt, it's probably going to be a 4th rounder with the compensation. But we all knew Malik was going to leave. It does leave a little bit of a void at backup quarterback. I don't think the backup quarterback is currently on the Packers roster. Do I think Desmond Ridder could do it? Yeah, but I would not be thrilled with that by any stretch. So we'll see what happens in the draft. We'll see if maybe they sign like a Zach Wilson or a Trey Lance. I do expect that will come closer to camp if and when that happens. Quay Walker signed with the Raiders and joined, ironically, Nakobe Dean, his former Georgia teammate. Walker got $12 million a year, which is way more than the Packers should have paid or would have paid. And the Packers should get a 5th-round comp pick for him. And, not too much of a surprise here. We found out that the Packers were trying to keep him, but I would never have paid that. The Packers clearly agree with me and most of Packer fandom. Quay Walker's been a little bit overrated. I think seeing the middle linebacker with the cool jersey number and 1st-round pick and, him having like a 90 speed rating on Madden, I think made a lot of fans maybe like him more than they should have. Always been a solid player, and we'll talk about his replacement in a little bit, but they lost Quay Walker to the Raiders. Romeo Doubs signed a deal with the Patriots. We still don't know how much. If you guys were on Twitter the day that he signed, there were different numbers reported. He is a good signing for the Patriots. The Patriots lost Stephon Diggs. I would say that Doubs has a ceiling of like a Stephon Diggs where a guy can get open over the middle, that 10 to 20-yard intermediate route. We all know what he can do in the red zone. Romeo's always been a player that I've really liked, but he's had some big drops and big moments. He's never been super dynamic. He's a guy who can get you a bucket, which is good, but the Packers are never going to pay him $17 million a year, nor should they. And they'll get a 4th-round comp pick, and I think Doubs is going to be really good for New England. I think it's a good pickup for them. The Packers also released Elgton Jenkins. Shocker. They cut Elgton Jenkins. The one surprise was we found out that it was with a failed physical. I think that's what it was. They were concerned about his injury. That saved them over $20 million on the cap this year. What's interesting, and we still don't know what this is for, but they did not have to cut him right away, and they made him a post-June 1 cut, which is interesting. So, in other words, Nate Hobbs we'll get there. Elgton Jenkins was a big cap savings. They did not have to cut him. They could have waited. They clearly wanted this cap space. We don't know why yet. Maybe there's a trade they're looking at doing. Maybe there's a player in free agency they haven't signed yet. Maybe it's for extensions. We'll talk about it. But they tried to trade him. They couldn't find a trade partner. That's fine. We'll talk about it in a minute, but they re-signed Sean Ryan. We knew that Elgton was going to be gone after that. They released Nate Hobbs for the final addition by subtraction, we'll call it. I didn't think they would cut Nate Hobbs, to be honest. I thought that they would pay him. They would let him play this season and compete in the slot, maybe do a little bit of outside corner. But they released him because they basically had a roster bonus they had to pay, and they were able to get out of it, essentially. Now, they only save $800,000 on the cap this season, but they save like $30 million over the next 3 seasons. So they do get a post-1 designation on him, meaning they essentially split the cap savings over 2 years. So it gets them about $10 million in cap this season. And again, they did not have to do a post-June 1 designation with him. So that makes me think that maybe they're still cooking something up via the trade market. So we shall see. And we'll talk about a little rumor at the end that could interest all of you. Re-signings. Let's talk about the players the Packers brought back. There's going to be a few that I left off, some smaller ones, but the most notable one was Sean Rhyan. I talked a little bit about this at the end of the season. I thought that it was smart to bring him back. They signed him to a 3-year deal, essentially to be their starting center. When he took over for Jenkins, I felt like the offensive line actually stabilized quite well and improved. Ryan's a very good run blocker. He always has been. He's never been great in pass protection. Now, that interior trio, it looks to be Aaron Banks, Sean Rhyan, and Anthony Belton. At the end of the year, the Packers ran the ball a lot better, even against the Vikings, the final game of the season. But pass protection's always been a bit of an issue for Sean Rhyan. The main reason they did it was because the center market exploded. Tyler Linderbaum got, again, I said it earlier, $28 million, which is, I think it was the biggest offensive line contract in history. I think the only one that was even close was Rashawn Slater. He's a left tackle. So I don't think the Packers were in that market at all. They shouldn't have been. I think a center is not that valuable. And the other guys that were out there were either signed already, like Biotis was signed. McGovern from the Bills was re-signed, I believe. There really wasn't a guy out there that made a ton of sense. Cade Mays was on the Panthers last season. He signed with the Lions. And the Lions, by the way, have lost a lot of offensive linemen. So I think bringing back Sean Rhyan was a good call in this particular period. There's no other guy that's better than him that they could have brought in that would have made a ton of sense financially. So it made sense. He can also play guard. And I do think they're going to sign or draft a center. And I do think that Jacob Monk's a good backup as well. So they also brought back Darian Kennard, Chris Brooks, Bo Melton, Christian Welts, Nick Neiman as well. And Kamal Haddon actually came in last night. So again, they brought back all the people you would expect, but they did lose a lot of guys. So let's get into who the Packers actually added. The first one was quite surprising. Zaire Franklin, the linebacker from the Colts. They traded defensive tackle Colby Wooden to the Colts, and they got Zaire Franklin back. Now, Zaire Franklin was an all-pro. He's been a Pro Bowler before. He's actually had a couple really good seasons. It was very surprising to see him become a Packer, for one reason, because we thought Quay Walker might be back at that time. Now, they owe him like $7 million this season, Zaire Franklin. So I don't think that it guarantees him a spot. They would not owe him anything if they cut him, as long as it was before week 1. And, it's a better savings than paying Quay Walker $12 million. That's just simple as that. Again, they can move on easily if they need to. Franklin's older. He's going to be 30. He's a high-effort guy. He likes to shoot gaps. He's very good at that. He's good at just attacking downhill. Not great in coverage. He does miss a lot of tackles. So I don't really think that he's an upgrade over Quay Walker. He's a different sort of average linebacker than Quay. But you would take veteran leadership. You guys know, and I'll talk about it at the end of this episode. I was pretty upset with the lack of veteran leadership on this team at the end of the season. And they got a little bit older at linebacker, but he's probably going to wear the green dot. They're probably going to ask him to do very simple things like shoot gaps, go and ram the A gap or whatever, and just get in the way. And then Edge Cooper can just flow and attack the line of scrimmage the way he does. So not much athletic upside here. The veteran leadership, though, is something the Packers clearly wanted. I think it's a great call there. The big one that they did, though, was they signed Javon Hargrave on Wednesday, I believe it was, to a 2-year, $23 million deal. This is the big cream of the crop signing to this point. Up until last season, he's been a very good interior defensive lineman, very good pass rusher. He wasn't a great fit for Minnesota's scheme. They actually had him playing nose tackle, which I don't think he's a nose, and I don't think the Packers will see it that way either. The Vikings also run a lot of stunts in games, and I don't think that's really what he's good at. They want him just running forward, beat the guard and centers, and just get to the quarterback. And I think that he can shoot gaps in the run game. I personally like what they got in him. Now, what's interesting is he actually led the league. He was second in the league in quick pressures the last couple seasons for defensive tackles. I was really impressed with what he did from a pass rush standpoint. Now, what I do think is interesting is, the 3 seasons he played prior to this last season, he got 60 pressures in each season. So there's a lot of pass rush upside. I think he's 33. So they got older, but they got much better on the interior. Now, you pair Hargrave with Devontae Wyatt, I think you can be pretty disruptive up the middle. And again, getting quick pressure, we talked about it all year with Rashan Gary. The only guy that can get quick pressure on the Packers is Micah Parsons. So to have another guy in the interior who can do it, massive pickup. They also signed cornerback Benjamin St. Juste from the Chargers. I'm not sure what I think about this one. I'm certainly not mad about it. He's a 6'3", 200-pound cornerback, very long, lengthy, got super long arms. He had an 8 RAS score coming out of the draft. I actually liked him in the draft, guys. Back when he was drafted, I think it was the same year as Stokes, I want to say. I was pretty happy with his tape. Now, when he was drafted by the Commanders, he was not very good. Last season with the Chargers, he was a part-time player, and he finished as PFF's 11th ranked corner. They pay him 2 years, $10 million. It's very low risk for cornerbacks. At minimum, he's going to be a depth piece that ends up being a special team ace. But I think there's a world where, especially if they don't really draft anyone high or they can't find anybody via trade, or the market's pretty slim at this point in free agency, but there's a world where he's a starter next season. I actually think, we'll talk about at the end how this compares from last season to this season. There's a world where he's a starter, and it's a pretty good deal if that's the case. So I like this signing a lot. Very low risk, high reward. I will say this. He's better than Carrington Valentine. He's probably better than Keyshawn Nixon. I still think that Keyshawn Nixon's going to be your starter. I know it's really sad to say that, but it's probably true. So Benjamin St. Juste, not a bad signing. Again, I liked him coming out of the draft. I think he, again, low risk. We'll see what he brings to the Packers in 2026. The last one is not going to get a lot of attention, but the Packers signed wide receiver Skyy Moore. And I really like this signing. First of all, he was a draft crush back in the day. He came out the same year as Watson and Dobbs, I believe. The Chiefs drafted him in the second round. I really liked him in the draft. Coming up through the draft process, he was one of the receivers I was most excited about. Now, he's never been a great receiver in the league. I think his best season was his rookie year, playing with Mahomes, but he's got a Super Bowl pedigree, which you love. He played some really important games for the Niners last year, but the main reason they signed him was to be their kick returner and punt returner. The Packers finally have a guy who can return punts and kicks effectively. Somebody ring the bells. I never thought they would do this. He's probably your 6th wide receiver on the roster, but they signed him to be a special teamer. And they finally signed a guy who is an expert in returning kicks and punts. They tried to do this with Mecole Hardman last year. You guys saw in preseason. There's no way they could have given him a roster spot. He fumbled I think he fumbled 2 punts in the preseason, which was his strength, by the way. And he's probably your 3rd string slot receiver. I'm not saying Skyy Moore can be a factor on offense, but I think he's a better receiver than Hardman was. And I think that he will be on this roster to be a special teamer that could be a depth piece. He's probably receiver 7, especially if Bo Melton's still a receiver for them. But his receiving grades throughout his career, 67 in 2022, 54 in 2023, so below average. 24, his grade was 36. That's bad. And then last season he had a 63 grade. So again, no one's going to confuse him for Randy Moss, but he's an average receiver who can return kicks. Now, when we're looking at have the Packers improved, are they good enough to compete? It's not week 1 yet. I'll just say that. I do not think by any stretch of the imagination that they're happy with where they're at currently. They have, I think, gotten better, and we'll talk through each individual one in a minute, but I do think the Packers are going to target defensive tackle in the draft, particularly nose tackle. They'll probably pick up an edge because I think losing Gary and Inigbari, by the way, which we didn't talk about, I think they're a little bit thin at edge. I think they could look at running back in the draft, and the position no one's talking about is receiver. I actually think, and this is so funny because I think if you said this like 3 years ago, the Packer fans would be like, no way, we'd be so excited. I think the Packers could take a receiver as high as round 2. And there's a certain percentage of the fan base that will be upset by that. You got to remember, they have not re-signed Christian Watson yet. I expect them to do so, give him an extension. But after this season, you essentially just have Golden and Savion on the roster. I guess Skyy Moore now as well. So they're thin at receiver. Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks are both free agents after this season. So there's no way in hell that they will not draft a receiver. They need bodies, if nothing else. Now, I think they're only going to draft one. They only really have room for one, unless they plan on cutting Savion Williams, which they will not do. So in the draft, I think that they're going to target receiver early. Again, interior offensive line is a need, cornerback, defensive tackle. The draft is going to be very, very important. And I do think that they have some ammunition, but next year they have a ton of ammunition. They have the potential to have, I think, 12 draft picks next season. They're going to get a third for Malik Willis, fourth for Dobbs, fifth for Quay Walker. We'll probably get another one for Rasheed Walker. Third or fourth, I would expect. He still hasn't signed yet, by the way. I know the Packers are not going to re-sign Rasheed. And they got the fourth for Rashan Gary. So they got essentially 5 draft picks in the 3rd to 5th round range in 2027. So they have ammunition next year to load up. This year it's a little bit thin. And I expect Goody to move around the board a little bit. But whatever draft picks they make this season, they're gonna have to hit on them. So let's answer the question though. Are the Packers better now than they were a week ago before all the losses and acquisitions? Let's talk through each one of them. Rasheed Walker is gone. Close to it, at least. Jordan Morgan in. So it's a low bar to clear because Rasheed was terrible last season. But we saw some good from Jordan Morgan. Now, again, this is a net upgrade, in my opinion, because of how bad Rasheed was. We have to bank on, and by the way, everything I go over in a minute, a lot of this, for this to be an improvement, we have to bank on improvement. Duh, right? Growth from these players, again, from a draft and develop team, the develop part is going to be crucial to the Packers' success in 2026. Rasheed Walker out, Jordan Morgan in. It's a net upgrade. What I saw from Jordan Morgan last summer when he was competing at left tackle, I don't know much about offensive line. I've really tried to get better at it. You guys have heard me say this before. I don't really know what I'm looking at. But if you put on the preseason tape and you listen to what everybody said that was in camp, he looked really good in camp at left tackle. And then obviously injuries struck and a lot of movement at that position. He had to come in and play guard. And I don't think he's a good guard. Most people agree that he's not a guard. So him getting a whole offseason to be the left tackle, I think, is going to help him majorly. He has to develop, but I liked what I saw in the games he played left tackle. He looked much better at tackle. So former first-round pick, you have to bank on the dude being good. And it's basically going to be crucial that he is good. And I will tell you guys right now, if you're going to hear a lot about, like Matthew Golden, or, look, Jaden Reed's back, Christian Watson, all this stuff on offense. Jordan Love's going to be an MVP candidate. I believe all that, by the way. The most important factor this season to the Packers being good, pardon me, in 2026 is Jordan Morgan. Is he good or bad? They're going to draft a left tackle. They might even sign a vet left tackle, but Jordan Morgan's your guy, and he needs to be good. I do think it's a net upgrade just because of how bad Rasheed was. Then we lose Elton Jenkins. We hand it over to Sean Ryan. We know this is an upgrade. We saw it last season. You'll hear the national pundits and even people in Packers sphere that are like, oh, God, Elton Jenkins, how do you not bring him back? Well, they saved $20 million, duh. But he was really bad at center last year. And by all accounts, he was not playing with his max effort either. And now he's a Cleveland Brown. So good luck with that one, Cleveland. But I think that Sean Ryan is an upgrade, especially in the run game. We'll see what he brings in the pass game. I think that a whole offseason to focus on center, brand new contract. I think that, if we see enough development from Sean Ryan, this could be a net upgrade. Now, Romeo Dobbs leaves. Skyy Moore comes in. That's sort of your direct comparison because all the other guys were here last year. But the increase in snaps for Matthew Golden and Dontavian Wicks, I think, makes this a net upgrade. I really do. You guys saw what Golden can do when he gets an opportunity, and he's going to get a lot more opportunity in 2026. If you guys can hear the wind outside, too, I apologize. It's freaking Hurricane Madison here on Friday, March 13th. So Wicks is the other guy. We know how good Golden can be. You guys know my stock in Dontavian Wicks is high. Look no further than when he was healthy this last season, and he actually got playing time. He made every opportunity of it, right? The second Detroit game, he clinched the game on that third down catch, the really high point ball he had to jump up and catch. We've seen him be really, really good in his rookie season. I think there's a lot of meat on the bone here. I think Dontavian Wicks can be better than Romeo was last season if he gets opportunity. So I actually think that's a net upgrade from Romeo Dobbs to Golden and Wicks. Golden and Wicks can be better than what Dobbs was last season with more opportunity. Flipping over to defense, this is the one that's probably the most obvious downgrade is Quay Walker to Zaire Franklin. It's probably a net neutral, actually. I think what Quay does as a blitzer is something that Zaire can't do. But I think he has a higher ceiling as well. I think that Quay Walker still is growing. That's what was kind of sad about losing him. I think he could end up being a really good linebacker. He's just young. But in terms of veteran presence, he's probably better in coverage. I like Zaire Franklin better in those aspects. But there's a world where, and this is a real chance, guys, we get to camp and Tyron Hopper beats out Zaire Franklin. I didn't even mention Tyron Hopper. I think Tyron Hopper can be the guy next to Cooper. I really do. He's grown every single offseason since he's been here. He took a big step last year. He's the 3rd-round pick, former captain for his team. If he takes another step coming into camp this season, I do think there's a world where they cut Franklin, save the money, and Tyron Hopper's your linebacker. Franklin as well, I'll be honest too, like his contract does not preclude the Packers from cutting him for sure, but the Packers have done a lot of work on linebackers in the draft too. I think there's a really good chance they draft a linebacker. If they got a guy they really like and they get him in like the 4th round, 5th round even, that's going to be a lot of bodies there. They already have Christian Welch, Nick Neiman. They have Isaiah McDuffie as well. The linebacker room is a little bit full right now. And if they draft another guy, I think that everyone's going to compete in camp and Zaire Franklin could get cut. So this one's the one where I'm like, it's probably a net loss. But, you know, Quay Walker was terrible in coverage. He had games where he just looked like he didn't even know where he was at. No offense. Like that Ravens game last year. I mean this sincerely, and I'm not an expert. I like to think I'm above average at football knowledge, but I will tell you guys with certainty that one of the biggest reasons that Derrick Henry ran all over the Packers was because of Quay Walker. So I do think there's a world where Zaire is a upgrade. Then we had Nate Hobbs to Benjamin St. Juste. This one's easy. Now, Nate Hobbs was signed last night by the 49ers to be their cornerback. He made $18 million last season for one season with the Packers. That's the biggest miss by Goody in free agency yet, in my opinion. St. Juste is just better than Hobbs. Hobbs gets signed by the 49ers last night for $4 million. So it's a far cry from the 12 that he originally got paid from the Packers. So I think Benjamin St. Juste is an upgrade. St. Juste could end up being the starter. Maybe the starter comes in the draft. Maybe they trade for somebody, but St. Juste is an upgrade, no question. Now, again, I don't think the cornerback room is done by any stretch of the imagination. I think there's still a chance they bring back Trevon Diggs as well. They're definitely going to draft a guy early. A lot of guys out there in potential trades as well. There's Cam Taylor-Britt. I think he's a free agent, though. There's guys out there the Packers have shown interest in prior to this offseason that I think they could bring in. But as it stands, Nate Hobbs to Benjamin St. Juste is an upgrade. Rashan Gary to LVN and Baron Sorrell. This one's kind of hard to say. If we take what Gary did at the end of the season, which everybody has seen the videos of him getting blocked by a receiver and him jogging to the quarterback, right? If we get that Rashan Gary, I think LVN can be an upgrade. I think Sorrell can be an upgrade as well. Rashan Gary is still a good run defender. He's a good player. I don't want to make it sound like he's bad. I think a lot of people just think he's terrible. He just wasn't worth $20 million a year, right? Ironically, he's worth what Dallas gave him, which is funny. I do think that, when LVN was healthy, he was a pretty good run defender. He actually has a high ceiling as a run defender. In the Detroit game last year, the first one, he was a big reason why Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery didn't have a good game. We saw when LVN was healthy, he had one of the better pass rush win rates in the NFL, which I thought was interesting. Now, again, when you put him in the middle next to Javon Hargrave and Devontae Wyatt, if you have like a 5 front, there's a lot of pass rush juice there as well. So I think that, Baron Sorrell is kind of like golden on offense. When he got opportunities last year on defense, he was pretty good. And that game against the Vikings, go back and watch that second Vikings game, the preseason game, if you will, or the exhibition game. The Packers have to have confidence in him after that game. And I feel like if they didn't, they would not have moved on from Gary. I think that there's a world where they try to do that contract that Dallas did with Gary, and he probably says yes. They have to have confidence. And I also like Colin Oliver. So is this a net upgrade? I'm going to say it's neutral. I think there's a world, though, where this is a big upgrade. Now, in terms of Javon Hargrave, Colby Wooden was out, Javon Hargrave in. This one's easy. I think that Javon Hargrave is much, much better than Colby Wooden. And honestly, Hargrave is probably better than Devontae Wyatt right now as well, which is high praise. This one's pretty easy. I'll save you guys some time on this one. Javon Hargrave in true pass sets last year was 11th in the NFL in win rate, which is very good. I think he was 14th in pass rush win rate anyway at defensive tackle. So I really do think that This is the biggest upgrade of the offseason so far. And they're definitely not done at D-tackle by any stretch. We'll talk about a potential guy in a minute that they could bring in. But Colby Wooden to Javon Hargrave, massive upgrade. Last one, kick returner. Romeo Doubs and Savion Williams to Skyy Moore. This is the biggest upgrade yet. Romeo Doubs, bad punt returner. If you guys didn't know, he's bad. It doesn't take an expert to see that. There were games last season where he would fair catch with like 20 yards in front of him, which I'm just like, what are you doing, dude? What are you doing? There were other ones where he would return the punt for like 2 yards and he had room on the other side, but he cut the other side. Skyy Moore is a really good punt returner and kick returner. This is something the Packers have not had for a long time. This could end up being a big acquisition here. Overall, if let's kind of summarize it and put a bow on this first YouTube edition podcast. From a starter's perspective, I think the Packers got better overall, but depth took a big hit, specifically at defensive line. Cornerback is still missing their top guy. I don't think they're going to find their top guy either. I think Keyshawn Nixon's going to be your CB1, and they're just going to hope for a better pass rush, which they probably have. The good news is offseason is still young. We didn't get a Micah Parsons trade until August last year. There's still potential cuts around camp that they could look at. There's still some guys out there in the free agent market I like. Which brings me to the final point. Let's talk about a couple of rumors and possible moves. The biggest rumor we heard yesterday on Thursday the 12th was the Packers have interest in Josh Sweat, the edge from Arizona. Now, the reason this is getting some traction is because, for one, Matt LaFleur's brother is the Cardinals coach, so this can be communicated effectively. When Gannon was fired in Arizona last year, Sweat wanted to be traded. So that's the interesting part. He clearly likes Jonathan Gannon. So you would think, well, that makes an intuitive match. The Packers needed edge rusher. They do. And Josh Sweat was a guy the Packers liked last year. They were linked to him in free agency. I thought they were going to sign him, to be honest. But he took more money, went to the Cardinals. He is a really good pass rusher. He's not Micah Parsons by any means, but he had 12 sacks last year. He had a lot of pressures last year. And when he played for Jonathan Gannon, he was really good. So I think putting him next to Micah Parsons, and then you still have LVN, you still have Baron Sorrell, that would be an insane edge rushing group. I would be super happy with that. Now, the question is, what would you have to give up to get in? Well, for salary, he would cost about $12 million on the cap, $13 million, I think, whatever. His salary, they could do some conversions to make it smaller. The biggest thing is, what would you give up in draft compensation? I think you could probably get away with a third or a fourth round pick. Maybe you do a fourth this year, a fourth next year, and then Dontavian Wicks or whatever. The Cardinals need receivers, no question. And I think that using Wicks or Reed as a trade piece for Sweat could be really smart here. Again, we talked about how many draft picks the Packers are going to have next season. He's not going to go for a first or a second. He's probably a third or fourth round pick. Maybe you do multiple fourth round picks. If you can get him for that, it's worth it. You do it every day of the week. Josh Sweat is not on the Cardinals timeline. He's 29 years old. He's, 1 year into a 3-year contract, 1 year into a 4-year contract, 3 years left. I'm not so certain it makes any sense for the Cardinals to keep him, and they need to load up on draft capital, ultimately. The Cardinals are going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year, and there's no question there. Again, it'd be a smart move for them. The other one that they're looking at is at nose tackle. They need a nose tackle. Javon Hargrave is not a nose tackle. He's a pass rushing 3 technique. We don't even know what scheme Gannon's going to run, by the way. If it's going to be 3-4 or 4-3. Regardless, he's not going to be your run stuffer. The guy out there that's interesting is Dalvin Tomlinson. I believe he played for the Commanders last year. I don't know who he played for last year, but he had his worst year in the NFL last season. He's been pretty good in the past, and the reason I put him on here and the reason they're linked to the Packers, or the Packers are linked to him, is because they almost traded for him back in the day. I think it was 2 years ago when he was playing for the Giants. The Packers had a trade on the table for him, and they ended up keeping him for whatever reason. So you would have to bank on him being his old self, but you can get him cheap here. He'd be another vet body. We'll see what else is out there. DJ Reader's still out there. He's a great DT, but I think he's going to be too much money. There might be some guys via trade. I know the Packers were linked to Jalen Carter for a little bit and Dexter Lawrence. Those rumors had some legs for a minute, but I truly believe the Eagles aren't going to trade Jalen Carter. And I just don't know who you can trade for that caliber of player. Dexter Lawrence, too. He's a little older, but you're going to have to give up a second-round pick probably, and you only have a second-round pick in the top, 70 picks this year. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it's going to happen. But I will end by saying we're only 4 days into the free agency period. There's a world where the Packers get much, much, much better than they are right now with maybe some trades or some signings. The draft's going to be important, and I will end the podcast on that note. I have done almost no draft prep. I've been very behind. Guys, if I did this full time, tell all your friends and family, maybe I can do this full time. I haven't been able to look at the draft too much, but I'll start digging into it soon, and we will have more episodes coming. It shouldn't be this much of a delay next time. If anything big happens, I'll do an emergency episode. And do me a favor, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go on there and like the video, and leave a comment if you like as well. It also helps to download the podcast and give a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. But I appreciate you guys listening and watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.